If you think about why the pyramids were built, you can get a couple of cool ideas about um, what they are, what they represent, and how useful it can be in our life. And this is the point of this video. It doesn't matter if you look at this in a way which is concrete, you know, or abstract, or just get from it an analogy. What's important here is what it is, what it represents, and what does the idea mean. And so the pyramids in themselves were a resting place for some people, right, who had a vision about who they are, and it helped them restore stability within the society they were part of, right? And they created something which created a sort of dominance over the overall population, right, and other authority figures, and it made them create something which outlived them. And this is the main part: is that in all of those facets, we live, or we see society as what it is today, as repeating those same patterns. Because you know the pyramids, from what they are at the time, are now something else. We have different items which represent the same thing, right? We have the phones we use, we have the brands we wear, we have the restaurants where we eat, and all of those things have a dominance, game of dominance over each other, and also over our own perspective of what is life. And there comes a point where that wave, that perspective, that motion of things becomes so strong that for a lot of us, the younger you are too, get overtaken by it, right? And so what ends up happening is that perspective pushes action. The actions that you take are aimed with a certain perspective in mind, with a certain point of view, a certain purpose. And so when it becomes that everything around you no longer comes from you, it doesn't originate from an authentic ground of yours, is not an organic growth from who you are as a person, then the actions that you take start to deviate also from who you are, and they start to become into something else. And that's when it becomes a bit darker as time goes, because now the actions that you take are fueled by other ideas, other perspective from other people that benefits their perspective, right? And it brings me to the second point: is that the point of having a perspective, and the point of why does it have value? Why would people agree to have the pyramids built, and to have these people in power and be mistreated, to have a society based on something that pretty much doesn't maybe logically make sense, or they don't bother thinking about it that way? Um, they they don't go to overthrow that system, right? Or it's not even something, a thought that comes into mind, because of how strong the system is, right? And the idea here, the important part of what I'm saying, is that the perspective, the what it brings is a stability. In this moment, at that moment, this system of these things in power, and the system of values that it brings a stability towards a bunch of the population. And sometimes that can become more important than the actual legitimacy of the thing itself. And we see it even in our personal life. And this might be a jump, but a lot of times we do things even though they don't make logical sense, or sense based on our system of values and things that we find to be important, but we still do them because of the stability, the peace of mind that we require, rather than to watch our world crumble, right? Some people dive into debt to do this. Some people turn to drugs and consume things to do this. Some people create chaos in many different, depend on temporary things, on many different various ways, just to maintain life. People act rich even though they lost everything, just so that they can maintain the image, because the image that they have in people's eyes becomes so important that it is more valuable for them to have that stay than to have their actual real life and the real situation become better. And that goes to speak about our general sense of values, of what's important, and of who we are as people, because this is what we do. And that's what we've been doing since the dawn of time, by looking at this example, right? And it also goes to show pretty much how we work as individuals, and the importance that it is to put into what it is that we buy into, what is it that we mentally and ideologically believe, right? And what is it that truly is of value, right? Because you can see it in a relationship between people. You can see that money isn't really what makes you valuable as a person. You can see that um, that who you physically are as a person doesn't make you that much value. That doesn't make you that much more valuable than somebody else, and that those things fluctuate. But it comes down to we always ask ourselves, well, what is then? What is it that is actually of value, and what is it that is worth pushing towards? What is it that is worth working on and protecting? And then you look at things like this, and you look at who we are as people, and you find that usually the center will come down to this, and all of this really does come down to this. Because look at everything that we do. We look at the at houses, right? There was a time when houses, at a highest peak of luxury, was the most designs and the most um, amount of wood, and it was the you know drawings and huge beds with huge wooden surroundings to the bed frame. And now, if you go to the highest level of society, the richest houses, it's the minimal. It's concrete blocks, and it's open space, and it's no doors, and it's um, all of this stuff, which is which makes you think, okay, well, at that time it was valuable. Here now it's not. That's a big time gap. But then you start to think in your own life, well, well, what I'm pursuing now, is it just temporary? It was valuable to today. Is it valuable in a couple months, years? How do you know? Like, and isn't it a question worth asking yourself, if you're going to spend time in your life which you're not going to get back onto things, and put some of your most precious times at risk, chasing things that maybe will not be valuable um, in a small time frame? And I think that these things guide us to the answer, that pretty much this idea of stability in our life, this idea of preserving a perspective, this idea of having stability in that sense, is really what is the most important thing that we have, the most important thing that really rules life, is what it is. Because for the longest time now, even money isn't based on an idea of material. It's no longer based on gold. It's something which is based on the demand, something that is based on people's perspective. So even when you go down to what we think rules life as it is, it comes down to this idea, right? And so, yeah, I think it's worth asking yourself that if every part of life around us doesn't come from ourselves, and it comes from other people, and that um, those things benefit their own perspective, point of view, then it comes a time when you have to ask yourself if that perspective, right, or the ideas which are pushed by a certain group, are something that you want to see as part of your life. Because by buying into it, you want it into your life. And yeah, there comes a point when, even for in your most selfish ground, you got to realize that, well, if that's the case, then who do I become as a person? And this is the most important part: is that who you are. If it's in its most essential place is a perspective, a point of view, then by buying into everything, what does that make you? How diluted do you become? And it's pretty much what we become as a society, as people, is that we became so diluted that these questions have hardly any meaning for most of us. Most people didn't watch to this point of the video, if you're watching this. And so that's there's two ways to this. That's the advantage that you have as a person, to understand that by removing and being more concentrated as a person, to be more potent in life, right? To be less distracted by buying into all these other things, is how much more power you have um, as part of this group, as life in life. And it's also goes to show us that that is the reason why we have become so passive, right? Because I don't see any other reason that we see a lot of things happen in life, but that we find so little willpower to do things about them. And it's because life, as we view it, the mirror in front of us, shows an image which doesn't come from us. It comes from somebody else. So we feel mentally it's like the efforts that you would make would be pointless, but they aren't. And yeah. The third point, before I forget, about the idea of pyramids is that there's this quality of dominance that had to be established. And so in our own life, right, we can see that we've talked about how the dominance of other ideas shape our perspective, but there's also a point of view where in your own life, at least by buying into things where we don't have a choice, we need to feed ourselves, we need to dress, and etc., etc., but at least to have the quality to have a dominance over those things, to not allow them to dictate us, but to dare give them an interpretation, to give them a context, and to attach them to things that we find to be valuable, right? It's like if you like a pair of shoes, well, at least when you wear them and act towards them in a way which refer you to that point of view, that refer you to that place within yourself, that reminds you of why did you get them in the first place? Why did you want them in the first place? But there is the other part of the culture which buys things and then treats them as if they're sacred things, and they don't want to wear them, they don't want to use them, they don't want to do nothing. And at that point, well, you're treating them like you saw them on the commercial, like you saw them on the shelf, right? And so those things, by not wanting to interact with them or not wanting to touch them so much, you give them that much respect and that much consideration that they overtake who you are as a person, because that's you've prioritized them over who you are as a person. And that's when it gets scary, pretty much, is that really what you're putting at risk is you're putting who you are at risk. You're putting stability of who you are and who you are to other people, and you go down that road and you'll find that you can dilute yourself into becoming no one, right? And so those are the three things to dare that I've learned about the pyramids. It's to dare dominate your mental space, dominate the world in a way where you know, in your perspective, dare dominate and give things interpretation, and that will give into the world a sense of stability, right? And the third point is meaning. Is that pretty much by having this in place, right? What we've done is that we gave a sense of meaning to things. And on the big scale, like the pyramids, and the small scale, like, you know, the difference, for example, between two coffee shops, right? Tim Hortons and Starbucks. If you buy into one or buy into the other, people associate different meaning to it. And this is something that we see repeating itself. And in this idea, the brand is sort of the dominant power, pretty much. And so, yeah, as I'm leaving this video, I just want you to think about this. And if you're down far into this video, just ask yourself this: why else is there a pyramid on the dollar bill? It's kind of cool, huh? Now, why is there an eye on it?